Om Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatja Akanda Rupa Sthitireva Moksho Brahmad Vitiye Shutayaha Pramanam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings in the world, living in constant recognition of this fact, is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Saviryam Kardavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May it sustain us. May it illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome here to the SRV Loka and our channel with its new website that you can look up on srv.wisdom.org or srbwisdom.org, and drink in the Dharmic teachings even in the midst of this pandemic, they're calling it, with the COVID virus, and in the midst of all the horrific wildfires that are burning right now on the west coast where I'm from, up in Oregon, and where it's difficult to even breathe because the smoke is so thick and people's whole towns have been burned and so forth. So even in the midst of all this trial, the sincere spiritual devotee, the yogi, the yogini, the austere practitioner, they all keep their mind focused on the Dharma. And one way to do that is, of course, through these modern mechanisms called the web and the websites that are founded in them. And by good intentioned people, because there are many very negative ways to use that medium. People have been complaining about that. But rather than complaining, we're trying to use it in a perfectly dharmic and righteous way, by sharing teachings that take the mind away from these problems, not in a way of hiding from them, because that's not the way of yoga, but in a way of placing your mind on something positive, like watering the flowers instead of the weeds, because you can go on brooding about negative things and make them worse, or you can think differently. You can also go running for solutions for these things, and they will go away and then come back again wearing another face. As Vivekananda told us, he said, good and bad can continually change off in this world we're here now. The flaming world, the virus-ridden world, good and bad are changing seats all the time, he said. One gets supremacy, and the other gets supremacy. They're always changing seats, he said. So since that's the condition, then you probably have perfect right to put your mind on positive things and not brood about the negative. The negative will pass. All things will pass. The good things will pass too. And if you take this rather philosophical viewpoint that India takes, that China takes, and Japan to a great extent, these Eastern and Middle Eastern and Far Eastern countries have wisdom, like even Confucian wisdom, and not Confucian wisdom, but Confucian wisdom. I think, some things I say might be facetious, but they're also Vashistas. So there are many words that go with this, along with this introduction I'm trying to give to Brahman, the points and principles of Upanishads that we're 1 week into now. So we're getting deeper and deeper into it, and so to finish my point there, we're using this medium several times a week, and giving live streaming classes. We're giving satsang Saturday morning. We're constantly beginning to put on webinars and seminars on great topics. The new website has God blogs on it, and the youth of SRV are putting many posts on it, and people can go up and surf it, as they say. It's a good word for Hawaii, because I used to surf these waves here when I was young, and spend time on it, which is a positive thing to do rather than sitting around and worrying or brooding or fearing something that's inevitable. And you can go out and work, and hopefully you do it with karma yoga as your foundation, as we've talked about many times here, dharma yoga and the 4 yogas, and make yourself more selfless and more facile in being able to share the teachings that lead to truth. If thine eye be single, you shall know the truth, and know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, are not alien words to Western religion. So they must have had some great meaning behind them then, and you can pick them up and put a new face on them. New face on ancient wisdom is what we're calling it. How it looks today to us and to the youth that we want to pass it on to. So when you look back as far as the Upanishads, and even before that into the Vedic period, you're talking at least several thousand years before the Christian era. And even Lord Buddha and Buddhism had its roots 550 years before the Christian era. So you can see how these teachings of India have persisted, and how they have transformed many minds and helped them to realize the one soul, many minds into one soul. That is called the Atman, with a capital S soul we're talking about, not the transmigrating soul that goes from birth to death and death to birth with the ancestors. That's another subject called relativity. And even that subject in India is a triple tier, isn't it? The first 3 worlds. May Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May we bring peace to the first 3 worlds. I used that with one of my old college friends the other day when I was writing to him. And he wrote back and said, why peace times 3? How about peace times infinity? I said, because infinity doesn't need peace. These 3 worlds do. There's a reason why we relegate this to the 3 worlds. If you arrive here to the heart, that is, if you love the Lord thy God with all your heart and all your soul, then peace is already yours. Probably was yours a long time ago, because that's how you got to enlightenment. You can't get to it without peace. Restlessness will not give it to you, and tamas will not give it to you. That is slothfulness. People who, I think I said it, maybe it was at satsang yesterday or last week, is that those who are caught in restlessness, they're born in the wombs of the restless. And those who are lazy all their life, they're born in the wombs of lazy beings. And unless there's a free soul amongst them that can, of course, take on families and help transform them for some higher reason, like bodhisattvas and jivanmuktas. They break all the rules of Maya. So if you're born in balance, and if you live in balance, you'll probably pass away in balance, and you'll come back if you need to in balance, or if you want to. These are also three things, aren't they? So these triputis are real important to Indian Dharma, and we have one in front of us right now, this week again, in this chart: the cosmic, the collective, and the individual. We're looking at the mind, and in India, as we will see with a little bit more Advaita this morning, Advaita is king. It's a king that, as I was using the word last week, is underlying everything. something that's not seen on the surface. So souls have to dig for it. That Atman in you has to be dug for, at least the way it is in the three worlds. So Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, blessed be, he said that some people's gold is buried under mounds of earth. You have to dig a long time to get it. But in his disciples that came to him, like the 16 direct disciples, he said all I had to do was brush away a few pebbles, and there was the gold shining. So some people bring that Atman full force back to earth. The Ishvara Kotis, the Jivan Muktas, the Bodhisattvas in Buddhism and so forth. They have this Buddha nature, this Atman shining right into the surface. It's not so far underlying. So you meet one of them, that's why they impress you, and you remember them all your life, even if you don't become, say, a follower or adhere to their philosophy or their way of thinking. So non-duality is that king that's lying behind everything. And you might say the queen is the mind in that case, that's expressing everything, the Shiva and Shakti, you see. And so when you get that together, and that's a little bit leaning more towards Tantra, which is one of the great streams in India, when you get that together, you find that it's all coming out of this oneness, or not two-ness as well. Basically, it's Shiva and Shakti, or it's Brahman and it's Maya. And so there are, as we used to say, always one appearing as two, but breaking into three and the many. So that was an old slogan we used to have in SR Vedam back 25 years ago when we first started. It's always one, but it breaks into two, and that's that bifurcation that happens where Shiva and Shakti, or Brahman and his Maya, all of a sudden have separate existence. Brahman and Shakti, if you want. And then it breaks into the many, and that's where Maya is a very high cosmic principle in Tantra. It's not just watch out for that or beware of it, or it's all negative or something. It's actually a protective thing for people in embodiment until they can ripen, like the skin protects the mango. That skin is the Maya, and you don't eat it in the end, but it does protect you until you ripen, until the fruit in you ripens. And those are all tantric teachings. So these triputis cover the dharmic teachings that go with all these special kinds of divine couples, or divine coupling. And of course, underlying that would be the great self, or Brahman, as I was just chanting about. May Brahman sustain us, may Brahman protect us, maybe not find fault with the world. How is that possible? The world is full of fault, and its people are full of fault. So how can that be in a Upanishadic sloka? Because the world has come out of perfection, and even though it's imperfect on the surface, it goes back into perfection. And as I was just saying about fault finding, or about all the problems that are attacking people right now in their life on the Bur Loka, that is on this third world, in these three worlds, can be overlooked, and you can see towards the perfection underlying them. That's how the world can, we cannot find fault with the world anymore. Nature is really kind of faultless. It's not sentient, so it doesn't go by praise or blame like people do. So you'll find the errors are more in the mind, and they work themselves into nature. Say like disease would be one of those. The errors in the mind, and then it works its way into nature, and nature figures out some virus or germ to give to you. But it all happened back in your mind. All disease starts in the mind, just like everything else did. So mind-only schools is what we'll get to here when I show you this chart about the Mahat, kings of heaven within you, which is coming up right after we look more at this king, the king of philosophy, or the king of existence, which is divine reality, or Brahman. May we not find fault with the world, with each other, or with the studies. So all of that is a triputi. See, those three things you have to kind of think about when you give up fault finding, and start concentrating on the flowers and and give less emphasis to the weeds. Pratipaksha bhavanam, they call that in our blessed Sanskrit language, that we express the Dharma through better than in any other language in the world. Dharma gets expressed through Sanskrit the best. It's powerful language. Words there that, for concepts long forgotten in the human mind, that you can bring back that are important, like impressions in your mind and reincarnation and Dharma itself and truth and non-duality. Advaita is the word for that. So these are all charged, supercharged words. And speaking again to a professor recently who told me, well, I see you're using words to try and convince me. And I thought it was kind of funny coming from a professor of philosophy to say this. So you're trying to convince me by using words. And so I told him, inside of words are letters, and inside of letters are intelligent particles, jnana matras. Do we have anything like that in other languages or in other words in any languages, that there are actually particles of intelligence inside the letter? That's underlying the letter, which is underlying the word, which is underlying the book, which is underlying the scripture, and so forth. So you telescope it all down or in, and you find the essence lying inside of you, that all of this is made of intelligence. Until you do that, all of this is made of Maya. And after you do that, all of this is just Brahman. Take your pick. Isn't that a Triputi? It's all Maya, it's all intelligence, or it's all Brahman. So this is how important teachings like this are. So when it comes down to wisdom, intelligence, thought, sound, letters, languages, then you have to look at the mind really closely. And the most pure part of that mind is the cosmic. And that's where we started last week with Ajativada. The first, I had to use some sort of pillar to get us into the cosmic mind, because otherwise I'm going to be focusing on and we've done that before, and we'll do it at the end of this class series again, be focusing on the Tower of Truth, which is all about non-duality. You see, you either don't call Brahman anything, there's no names, like some religions don't like names for reality, or you call it everything non-dual that you can possibly think of in your language. So a doorway from no mind, if you want to call it that, or perfect mind, or Atman, is cosmic mind, Mahat. There it is listed second. I hope to get to that today, but I want to finish up this Ajativada doorway that gets us into the collective and the individual. So it is a very great teaching for people to inform themselves of, so their thoughts will become lucid. They can figure out how everything trickled down, as I like to say, or trickled out from the word. There are levels in which consciousness visits and associates with, and it's based on vibration. And that vibration is either causal, like is the case with the word and the Mahat, or it's collective, which is then the words of the gods and worlds of the gods and goddesses and so forth, and down to the bridging the ancestors. And then finally it's individual, where everyone takes on the ego as if it were real. That really silly song, that was earlier in the West. I've got to be me, who else could I be? It's like just a sentimental, silly song that came out that somebody was like voicing, with this sentimental music. I've got to be me, who else can I be? And so it's all ego, you see. So this is how people, I'll think of the rest of the words and sing it next week for you with the auto harp maybe, if you like. But I've got to be the Atman, and what else could I be? Was how the spiritual soul would be saying this. I'm not the me at all, not the me with the small m. I can trace my lineage and my heritage back to the cosmic mind, to the great Ishvara soul, to the avatar. I'm part of his family, her family, the Matri avatar, the Kali avatar. And so when you find out this to be the truth, then you've opened these great nadis, or these great passageways, again for yourself in this lifetime back to your essence. And involution and evolution you begin to tire of that. But probably if you're going to teach it to others to release them from suffering, you're going to have to know those steps. Some souls, like I say, moth to a bonfire, when they see, if they're sensitive souls and they see the light of Brahman or Almighty Father or Buddha nature, however you want to call it, Allah, they'll go straight towards it, and that's it. No more births in bodies for them. That's heart chakra kind of stuff. You see, the higher chakras in Kundalini. You feel it deeply and love God, and then you want to express it, and finally you want to see it face to face and have a vision of it, and then you just merge in it like a hailstone in an ocean, Shankara says, giving up all form. So for those who then can somehow gather their mind back from Brahman, as Sri Ramakrishna called those Ishvara Kotis and so forth, they can somehow gather their mind back from non-dual samadhi, and that not only as they sit there day to day, if they go into non-dual samadhi, which is very rare, but of course the master did that a lot, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. In view of modern society in the 1800s, he was doing that. In India, where they knew what samadhi was, to some extent, they'd had long history of it. So that doesn't mean just in the body day to day, but at the time of passing, they'll also merge into Brahman and bring the body-mind mechanism from cosmic mind on down back into existence again. They'll become a hailstone again. And those are probably, you could say, using the analogy further, the metaphor, those are very big hailstones. Sri Ramakrishna said, that's why we never, in whole cycles of time, humanity never forgets Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, and others. He said, because they didn't dissolve at the time of Mahapralaya. Another word that we'd have to understand in Sanskrit, the great dissolution, Mahapralaya. So I heard today of a friend, a future friend I think, who's thinking all new about the Big Bang. And so he's calling the Big Bang part of the Sri Chakra mandala. And so I want to hear about that. You see, I want to hear what that, and he evidently saw some of my books, and he wants to hear about me speaking about this new face on ancient Dharma. You see. So maybe we'll have that happen soon. So in the meantime, we're going to have to think these deeper thoughts and give them birth back into our minds. That is, if you want to say it that way, you'll have to find a way to go back to the cosmic mind. And like we're all meditating on Buddha, or we're meditating on Krishna, or we're meditating on Sri Ramakrishna, or Swami Vivekananda, that's, whether we know it or not, that's just opening, they say it's a relationship, that's, put that in bhakti terms, but actually it's creating a great channel for you and other souls to find yourself right back to the feet of the Lord, another bhakti expression. Or opening up the third eye so you can see the light of Brahman and merge into it consciously and come back again into the body consciously, like a Jivan Mukta would. Videha Mukti, probably been there once, done that, not coming back again, thank you very much. But emanations off of that great thought or that great thinker, non-dually speaking, will come back as a matter of course. You know, they'll leave something precious behind, and people will go treasure hunting for it. See? Just like we have to treasure hunt now through the Dharma. So I've made 300 maps leading to different treasures in the last 10 or 20 years for people just to reawaken to these ancient teachings that are as true can be. I'll go into the court of Advaita, and the judge will ask me, so will you speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, I will. And I'll tell them about these great teachings that are out of ancient India, and how great souls championed them and kept them alive. Right up to Lord Buddha 550 years before Christianity was even a sparkle in the West's eye, you see, Western eye. So these are great triputis then that you'll have to use to understand and explain to others. So we left off last week with the parinama chart. I was going to go through the other half of that. You can probably see that on other classes I've given, but the other half of it starts where this begins. So we did the Advaita part of it, and I'm going to leave it there. And the only thing I want to do is just tell you, instead of doing the last half of that chart, stay with the Advaita and try and give you an idea of what a Jativada is all about in a more today's version. See what we have to hear in order to understand it. So let's begin there as far as the teachings go, and we can all focus and drink this in. The first quote there would be good to introduce things. Non-duality is not a philosophy. It is natural, transparent, and all-pervasive. It's a verity underlying all things and all phenomena, all beings, and everything that constantly undergoes change in cycles. Cycles like the 4 yugas, Mahayuga they call it. But then there's a Mahapralaya behind those 4 cycles, that everything gets dissolved there. And a Mahapralaya is a long, long sleep for everything. Just pure conscious awareness resting in its own nature. And then back comes another cycle of time, because everything is endless. So these cycles are very important to know about, not just one that starts with a big bang and ends with everything getting dispersed far out with no involution after it, just an evolution after a big power. You have to also have the knowledge of how sentient souls get back to their source, especially if the mind they use to produce the dream of relativity gets through with relativity and wants to return to a source, then it goes back within, as Jesus said, kings of heaven within you. So I add that in here because I didn't finish that little thought about Jesus, Buddha, Krishna being loved by humanity. Sri Ramakrishna said they're icebergs. Some icebergs can melt under the sun. He's talking about water congealing into a form. So some congeal into just little icebergs, you see, and then they melt when the sun of wisdom rises, Sri Ramakrishna says. But these are huge icebergs that turn to stone almost. You can't melt them. They've been in existence so long. So the thought of them will exist even through Mahapralaya, and they'll come back as Krishna again on the battlefield, for instance. And Dalai Lama again in the press of the problems of Tibet, you know, with their enemies. So all of this happens constantly, but these great souls persist. We'll never forget them. And that's also why God with form is very important to the quotient. You might call that formless form when an iceberg goes into pralaya and persists there waiting for the next cycle of time to come about. So there's no end or beginning or middle to anything. Krishna explains that very well in the Bhagavad Gita. And he talks about it in terms of Triputi, manifested Prakriti, unmanifested Prakriti, and the Supreme Self, or Brahman, my true nature. So they'll find this teaching haunting the Dharma, as it were, all the time. It's like permeating it like sweetness in sugarcane juice, Sri Ramakrishna said. Gaudapada has declared that it is the obvious and simple truth, the essence of existence, uncontestable in all realms of the world's religions and philosophies. So this underlying foundation is there, like a weave, a warp and woof of thread through the cloth, like gold and gold objects. They have some really beautiful ways in English that you can understand this underlying that disappears when the form appears. Oh dear, we're getting married? You're giving me a diamond ring? Thank you. And she looks at the ring and just loves the ring. But the gold is there, see? And that ring gets melted later, and it turns into liquid gold and gets turned into another ingot or something, and the gold is always there, and the form's always changing. So the clay elephant, clay mouse is another one of the great teachings in Advaita Vedanta about, the size is different, but it's just all clay. So you see this one underlying thing, like Gaudapada is saying here, all underlying all religions and all philosophies. And you probably stop courting religion when you understand this. You probably go beyond the Dharma when you understand this, because Krishna mentions that in the Gita. You go beyond all dharmas and come to me. I'm your supreme dharma. I means the Atman. I means Brahman. And you do that through Ishvara, God with form, through this great soul, Father of Yoga calls it, a unique soul among all souls. So all of that is. It's not to be denied, any of it. It's to be recognized and comprehended, and then utilized for the good of all beings, who some of them can't jump from the lowest step to the highest step. There might be a few souls who can, Sri Ramakrishna said, but they won't know what the middle steps are made of, you see. So you walk them one at a time, but if you're not strong enough, you need that God with form to save you, as it were. And you can't pull that rug of worship or dualistic foundation out from under those people, because they'll get to the higher steps through following that worship. It'll take longer, it'll take a longer time, but God with form has that doubly important facet to it, and that's one of the beautiful things about the Upanisads that we're talking about here. It's Advaita, and it contains Vishishta Advaita, but its essence is Advaita. Those are the three steps in philosophy: dualism, qualified non-dualism, and non-dualism. So Gaudapada, you hear from him, it's got the taste and flavor of non-duality unmixed with anything else. It's got some of the most beautiful teachings that are just stripped of all unnecessary jargon or words, just expedient and economical in the world of philosophy, to get you right to the point if you're able to. If you don't have the strength to jump steps, or maybe you need those steps to come back out and take on a body-mind mechanism through the three phases of mind. So you need to know these steps if you're going to really help remove unnecessary suffering from others. Here, there's no way you're going to remove suffering. Suffering is. You can remove unnecessary suffering, though. So this chart, I'm not going to give it its full time. I just want to read some things to you that are very acid-like, that are coming straight from this non-dual level of thinking, or non-thinking, as our founder, Lex Hixon, bliss be upon him, had always said to us. But these are things that will help people get over superstitions. That's why I put it together. Swami Vivekananda said the Advaita has to come along and be broadcast and take away the superstitions of irreligion. He said religion has become irreligion in this day and age, and he wasn't talking just about fundamentalist Christianity or a fallen Judaism. He was also talking about Hinduism that he saw when he was there. So this is because people are believing half-truths or outright fables in the name of philosophy. And the clarification needs to come from that higher mind. And he's, of course, qualified to do that. So let me read you a few things as an example. God does not create worlds. The mind does that in its, what? Individual, collective, and cosmic forms, via its innate powers of cosmic projection, or sankalpa. You can hear it in English, but if you go back to the Sanskrit word, which is going to be difficult in this day and time, unless people are qualified somewhat, you're going to have to make it understandable for children if you want to teach them, which you should, these teachings of birthlessness, deathlessness of the soul. that death is just a transitional thing that happens, and old age is just a phenomena and doesn't need to be incite fear or doubt in a person, because they're the underlying essence that's being related to here. So that's one very powerful teaching right away. Somebody asked me this morning in a meeting, what's one of your pet topics, you see, that you want to give out? And I said, to bring back this idea of the mind-only schools and make people think about it, that God is not a creator. I mean, if you want to sing it, it's even in the stotrans of India. Nirmula mula rahito hi sadudito ham. Nirtuma duma rahito hi sadudito ham. Nirdipa dipa rahito hi sadudito ham. Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. The very first verse the Advaita sings about non-duality in the Advaita Gita, of these 40 verses that are called a chalisa, he brings up this point. And of course, when I do it into English, I like to use a few words that Swami Vivekananda coined, one of them being acreate. So nirmula mula, and all of those words start with that prefix nir, which means extinct or blown out, you see, kind of use one time, and then when you transcended them, they dissolved. It's a very powerful word. Nyacha in Sanskrit, according to Sanskrit, and Shankara, this dissolution or dissolving the mind back into its sources, a conscious act you do every day. At the end of the day, then you have nothing left. You projected it in the morning, you sustained it during the afternoon, and you dissolve it at night. And that's another triputi. And the mind does this, or can do it, even at the individual level as a practitioner. Very important to do that. So there's nothing left over. If you die the next day, you did your dissolution last night. You see, if you didn't do the dissolution and you die the next day, you're carrying all that weight with you still. So day by day you do this dissolving of the mind stream, we call it in Vedanta, and Buddhism has its version of it too. It's very big. Yoga too, you'll find it mentioned in the Yoga Sutras. Dissolution of the mind, Patanjali says, is an important practice in yoga. So back to the actual English of this beautiful sloka. I am acreate, distinct from all worlds projected by the mind. There's your English mantra. Just go think about that. I am ever present, never obscured by clouds of my covering, conjured up by the mind's ignorance. I am the light shining in other objects. I am self-luminous. I am pure existence, equanimity, and ecstasy, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. Let's look at how the Hasamalaka put that. In Shankara's time. He was one of Shankara's students who loved the Advaita. Mukha basako darpane drishamano mukhatvam prataktvaina naivasti vastu chidabasako disajivo pitadvad Sanicha palabdis swarupanamatma Yata darpana bhava abasahana mukam vidyate kalpana hina mekam tata diviyoge nirabasa koyaha Sanicha palabde swarupahamatma Sanicha palabde swarupahamatmam Om. So the way he puts it is, as the reflection in a mirror is identical with the object reflected, so too is this universe identical with the self, only revealed in the mirror of pure mind. Thus are living beings perfect images of the eternal subject, the undying self, and that limitless self am I, identical with the Supreme Being. Remove the reflective surface and all form disappears. What remains is the formless essence, the objectless reality. Like this, when the external mind is stilled and focused on reality, what is left is oneness, the eternal abode, my true existence. So see here, some thousands of years apart, the Avatar's talking about it, this I am a create, beyond all worlds, not subject to Maya's coverings. And then Hastamalaka in probably 700 AD, Shankara's disciple, speaking about it in that same fashion. It's like unchanged. The only thing that doesn't change is this non-duality, this truth of Brahman. Through all that span of time, and mere couple thousand years, what about a Mahayuga, and it comes back to us? Why is it still here, in the West of all places? In the arrogant West, the materialistic West, whose faith and love of God is now very suspect because of the march of irreligion. So you could be a fire-darting reformer, as Swami Vivekananda said. He didn't really like that kind of attack that those kinds of people take, because you're just trying to kickstart an old system that's still got us all its imperfections in it. It's called the mind system. But if you purify the mind in whatever way, even starting with the body and senses, and do it from the ground up, and get to the mind and then do the purification, or if you can start at the intellectual frame of reference and acknowledge the Lord and the Mother of the Universe, or powers that are unseen, the real powers of the universe and of universality, then of course you're you're going back to the original template of consciousness, which is pure, perfect, indivisible, birthless, deathless, all these things that they're talking about. So God does not create worlds, the mind does that. If that's subject for a retreat, just that one sentence is subject for a retreat, and it needs to be recalled and emphasized, so people aren't just saying, maybe some people who are Dharmic saying, oh yeah, I understand it, but then they aren't going very deep into it, not thinking about it, not taking it literally. So lots of times in the past I've said, religions are taking things out of their scriptures literally, which shouldn't be taken literally, and they're overlooking things that are in the scripture that they should be taking literally, which they're not taking literally. Well, this is one of those things that are in the scriptures. This is all out of the Upanishads, all of it. Those are 108 scriptures right now. This is something that you need to take literally again, so that you know God's not a creator. So quit saying that, please. And you are not a creator either. Your mind is, and that's the problem. You are a create, just like Brahman. That's what the Avadut just said. Pure conscious awareness. Indivisible, ever free, never bound, Vivekananda called it. So go back to your non-dual roots. You know, if they're covered, uncover them. Get to the underlying. Remember them again. Have your divine memory remember it, and try and bring it back here and sink it deep into the mud of this world. Like the pylons they have to drive into the Bay Bridge before they made the new bridge some years ago. Drive those things deep down into the mud and the bedrock, so thousands and thousands of cars can pass over them a day after they pay those damn tolls and wait through the lines. So basically, this needs to be done for souls to pass from individual to collective to cosmic. And I'll tell you, the collective, when we look at it, is a dense toll bridge with long lines, lanes of lines, like the San Francisco Bridge, that you have to try and get through to get home. See, so maybe that should be a good God blog with some metaphor there. So this is why the staying home is good. Not socializing with ordinary people is good. Staying away from places that are not talking about the Dharma is good. So this is how something negative, like the virus that's going on right now, yogically can be turned into something very good. And you can spend time now with your children and with these deep teachings, talking about them, ruminating about them, sharing them with others, and doing it in such a way that you're striking out fear and brooding, and you're increasing love of God again. What else does Advaita help us with? God does not bless or curse anyone or anything. The law of karma brings about just fruits accordingly. That is all. No God here. It's just karma, Swami Vivekananda used to say. That is, God isn't here in material things. God can't be an object, it can't be a vibration, it can't be a thought, and it can't be matter, which is where you would go with a teaching like that. So you strike those three things out, another Tripudi. Strike them out. What have you got left? Me? The one who just said that? The one who has to try and understand it and live in it? Then bring it all back later if you want. Come confusion, come delusion, like the magician said. Bring it all back later if you want, but it's not going to affect me now because I've remembered the truth, and the truth has set me free. And I'll never fall into the clutches of Maya again and all that suffering that the soul went through for hundreds of lifetimes. The bodies that they inhabited also came from the mind. They didn't come from God. Your parents and nature couldn't provide them alone. You took them on. You projected them. What's my next body going to be? What am I going to be like in my next body? Do you remember doing that? Think back to the crib, see, and before. The Tibetans are doing it all the time. Why can't you? This is called what Krishna calls in the Gita, looking back to your past lifetimes. Oh, Arjuna, I've had many and I remember them all. He must have sat somewhere under a tree, like other great souls did, and yeah. You see. But he was doing it from the standpoint of, I was always the Atman. I was always the avataric descent. And dissolving everything at the end of the day or at the lifetime that didn't jibe with that. To keep his mind perfectly clear, like a mirror wiped clean, Shankara said. These two great souls, Krishna and Shankara, spread apart by some 3,000 or 4,000 years. In an age that goes on and comes back again many times. So, those people suffering the wildfires on the West Coast right now, some few decades ago or however long it was, those people in New Orleans that got all flooded and so many people died, I actually heard some people, some religionists saying that they deserved that God visited that on them. You see. That is so against even the thought of God. I mean, you say it's against a compassionate God, but we're not talking about a compassionate God. We're talking about a God that is beyond compassion and suffering. the true God, that all the religions say that they believe in, but then go to war when it doesn't jibe with what they think, with another nation. That one divine reality, which India so perfectly puts as formless, birthless, deathless, pure conscious awareness, timeless, and all the other words we could look back on if we wanted to stick with the Advaitic subject. So, karma brings all of this about. Whose karma? Yours, your ancestors, and whatever you're dragging along from things like Maya, which is a very cosmic level, samsara, a very cosmic level in the mind. Heaven, you're bringing karma back from heaven, called pleasure, desire for pleasure, and you have it here on earth. God does not heal or cause disease. All illnesses, their causes, and their cures rest in the mind with the individual ego. Back to the Antakarna we go to find the causes for all the effects here. Why? Because Brahman is beyond cause and effect. You cannot drag God into the world. It's not right. It's not meet. It's confusing, blaming God for your own problems, for your society's problems, for the problems inherent in Prakriti, or nature, like disease. Further, God is not responsible for floods, famine, or pestilence. Such catastrophes are caused by nature, the 5 elements, weather, etc. All those causes are to be found in the mind. See? So why is it that every time I want to go out and work in the garden, it starts raining? See? There must be some rain god. See? Or I want to go out and fold some cloth and everything, some tarp, and it starts blowing. Ever tried to do that in the wind? It's because my mind is controlling the weather. Weather is in my mind. It's in everyone's mind. So are wildfires, diseases, and everything else is in the great mind. The great mind has its disadvantages. Every mind does. So the great mind, of course, the Trinity. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Shall we? Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Deva Maheshwara, Gurur Eva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the great Trinity. See? They're the Guru. They're the beginning of all vibration. Om is there with the Trinity, the Word which was in the beginning. And that pool of vibration is just rife and ready for expression. And those souls are ready for it too. And if it were just divine expression, we'd go, great, one lifetime and I'm out of here, you see. Or I'll just stay at the feet of the Lord, like with Krishna or with Ramakrishna, in that loka, see. But when it comes down to samsara and maya, I won't venture. Below the heart chakra, I won't go, Sri Ramakrishna said. So you had to meet him in the living room of God. He called this the drawing room of God. A rich man has his drawing room in his huge mansion. That's where he likes to hang out and smoke his pipe and put his feet up and be free of all the flatterers that are coming looking for his money. That's how Sri Ramakrishna put it. So, otherwise, he will think about you from there. That's called patita pavana. See, I'll think about you. I'll attract you. You can do it. You can come to me. But I'm not coming down there. I tried that once or twice. I wasn't treated very well. You didn't believe in me. God, that is Brahman, because we're using those words interchangeably, the Absolute cannot be prayed to, as it is not an individual. but rather the cohesive whole. God with form can be supplicated, but that God abides in the mind too, as do the heavens and lokas. So that's how Swami Vivekananda put it. Ishvara, this great soul, is also inside of your mind. It's a concept. It's a very high and powerful concept. You don't want to mess with it. You want to realize it. You get to the Father through the Son. It's that simple. But nevertheless, this is the greatness in you when you feel the greatness, is coming straight from that source, Mahat and Ishvara. The Trinity, they can pass themselves off as Ishvara. They might as well be Ishvara. I mean, is Shiva any slouch in that department? If he can dissolve all the worlds in space and time, who can do that? And who can bring them back? Like Brahma, you see. Well, good dissolution you did there a couple Mahayugas ago. It's time for me to come along and bring it all back. Watch this. Here's a lotus, there's Vishnu, here's the Bijam. Poof. Everything's off and running again, like at the races. And it, over and over again, it happens. You'd think by now we'd remember it. But if we've forgotten it, you have to go back to the source. The source of all form is Mahat, is Om, is Ishvara. But beyond that is the formless Brahman. That's their foundation. That's the underlying, with a capital U. So don't pray to God, the formless. Pray to the personal God. But have a relationship with that means open a nadi to it. A path you can go to. And if at the end of the day you want to dissolve things that aren't worthy of keeping, you go to Shiva and ask him to do that. And watch it happen. Watch things. Like Holy Mother, I could think of anything at one point and it would come to me the next day. She didn't even have to get up and move out of her seat, her asana. It's just so facile and so plugged into the Mahat, to the Trinity. Because there she was in a body. Even Brahman weeps, caught in the net of its own Maya. Put that on and think about it for a while, Sri Ramakrishna said. Even Brahman weeps, caught in the net of its own Maya. There's Holy Mother in a form. There's Krishna on the battlefield. What the hell am I doing here? See? You drag me here again for this war? For a millionth time I have to go through this just for the sake of a few souls? The rest will all just go to hell in a handbasket until the next yuga. God and the soul, Atman, are non-different. Thus the soul cannot be created, neither from dust, by the gods, or even by the mind. God, soul, self are identical, undivided, and acreate. So you cannot create a soul then. Nobody can. A soul is. That's what acreate means. Brahman's acreate, so is your soul, because Atman is one with Brahman. But when Atman takes on some conditionings, you could call them the five sheaths, like coverings, body, energy, mind, intellect, and ego, then it pretends itself, you see, as Gaudapada said, it dreams itself by its own Maya into sportive play. Not the words he would use, but that's what it does. It dreams itself away from itself. And all it has to do is wake up to realize that it was all a dream. O dreamer, awake, you must, you must. One of the great beautiful songs of India. Good and evil, they're in the human mind, not in God. God does not take sides in war, nor does God fashion a devil and fight evil. The human mind causes all such folly, while God remains transcendent, always and ever abiding in the eternal peace. Clear enough? So let's not go marching with some banner that God's on my side You started the war. You try and fix it. That's your karma that came from that war. And you're trying to blame it on a god or devil. It's not going to work. It doesn't wash. It just doesn't wash. That is, God, who is eternal life, does not take part in life in bodies, neither in heaven, on earth, or in hell. God does not cause death either. These apparent assumptions and movements are dreams in the collective mind. God does not dream. And Vivekananda puts a big confirmation on that for us. To think that consciousness dreams is ridiculous, he said. Brahman never dreams. It never plays or sports either, according to the Advaitas. In fact, probably would say be better that it dreams either consciously or unconsciously, rather than just say it sports. So why would it want to sport when it has everything inside of it? But I was just saying, I'm not going back there again, below the heart chakra. That's where they torture the self. They torture the self, Krishna says in the Gita. They torture the Atman, the evil. Find it in the chapter called The Division Between the Divine and the Demoniacal. And wake up to this exact thing. I mean, Krishna is putting it in no uncertain terms that aren't Advaitic terms. He's talking about good and evil specifically there. But with this as the underlying truth. Brahman, God, exists beyond the mind and its projecting power. It is desireless, so can only be united with by fulfilling all desires and transcending the mind. Brahman, God, exists beyond the mind and its projecting power. To repeat that first sentence. So the mind is involved in the projection at one of these three levels. We'll keep going and we'll look more at that. I'm just going to do this column alone to give you a taste of what Advaita is and what it means and how we should try and remember it at the level that it exists, which is capital E, existence. It's really all that exists. Brahman is all there is. And all of this is what? Projection, an expression, a play, a dream, an illusion. Take your pick. Different philosophies have honed in on one of those terms for it. Maya, samsara. Time, space, and cause and effect operate when the mind is present. They do not function in the Brahman state. Therefore, events in time, objects in space, and the happiness and suffering of cause and effect are not present in Brahman. Put it simply, no dualities there. It's non-dual. It's acreate. And the final one, mind in conjunction with nature produces all things, inclusive of bodies and worlds. This amounts to projection and withdrawal of concepts and ideas and cycles. That is a good description in one sentence of what's going on. Projection and withdrawal of the mind in cycles. Rather than projection and evolution of real objects with beginnings and endings. We looked at that last week actually on the Parinama chart, if you remember. False superimposition and other ways of looking at that were called false ideas or confused concepts that people put forth. Therefore, man is not an animal. He is a sentient, eternal soul. He has not evolved from animals. Animals and all other forms are actually produced from his mind. So if you love animals, then you should never think I was once one of them. Consciousness can associate with other forms, and it does. Everything's animated by prana, which is a form of consciousness. But to think that you were actually once an animal when you're actually always the eternal soul, it's just completely backwards. Secondarily, to think that you were once an animal and you work yourself from an animal to a human state is also a mistake in thinking. You were always the soul. You were always the human. You had a mind. They didn't. Animals, insects, plants, they can't get enlightenment. They can't think. They can't study a philosophy. They can't get into yoga. They're parts of nature. Nature came from you. Therefore, it all came from you. Animals too. So love them, take care of them, and so forth. And know the truth, that you were never one of them. They came out of you as imaginations, as dreams, as projections, and as things to play with, sport. Never demean yourself that way. It's philosophically wrong. You're supposed to, and this will come clear when we look at the 5 sacrifices, which we're going to look at soon. In fact, we won't get to it if I don't move along. So, like I said, one column of this, the God, Brahman, self column. There's another column, half column, called the mind and the world. We'll get to that maybe at the end of the 4th class. We can return to it 2 Sundays away if we have it. But this is just the non-dual part that comes out of deep thinking about Advaita Vedanta by an Advaitist. An Advaitist who accepts God with form, like Sri Ramakrishna did. God is with form, God's beyond form, both. But God's also beyond the concepts of form and formlessness. So he wasn't going to limit it. Neither was he going to negate any of it. He said, if I want the way to the fruit, I'll weigh the whole thing, not just the flesh. The fruit seller, he'll cut everything away and sell you the flesh. And that's Advaita, that's essence. He said, I'm not like that. If I want God to know what God is, I want the full weight of the fruit. I'll weigh the skin, the seeds, the stem, the pulp, and give them to the cows, Holy Mother said, after you take the flesh out of them. That was her way of saying that. Well, the cow is a very sacred animal. It gives and gives and gives and asks nothing. You should hold the peelings of the fruit up to its mouth with your hand and let it eat out of your hand. Do that service back to it. So that's living a dharmic life on earth. Okay, with the remaining time in the first half, let's make a move towards Mahat. So you might think, oh my gosh, look at all we have to do in 2.5 classes, you see. But basically, now we can get to the charts and move through it. Because the Advaitic part of it has been expressed as far as words in English can say at this point. So let's look at this kingdom of heaven within, that I like to call it. At one point, I just got rather tired of, well, 2 things. I got tired of of what's in this quote at the bottom. Science has us looking backwards in time, as if we were once animals. The contemporary religious view has us looking up towards the skies, as if heaven were somewhere above us. But these are both outer realms. The kingdom of heaven lies within, and the only real within is the mind, in its dreams, its visions, its projections, and its thinking process. Mind is everything after a creation is no longer cognized. When creation begins, we call projection, then the mind takes over everything. That's the mechanism. That's the Mahat. The great mind. And it has at least 2 other ways of vibrating. Levels, you might call it. A kind of staircase like this. Here's the lowest individual level, this darkened land with its pleasure palaces and so forth. Here's the middle realm, you see, the mind in heavens and so forth. And here's the doorway into cosmic, into the Ajativada we were just looking at. So this collage has been put together in that way to show that even visually you can depict these worlds. you're seeing this with the two outer eyes, you're seeing this with the subtle senses, you see. And you're seeing this with the single eye. That's another triputi. You've got gross senses, you've got subtle senses, and you've got causal sense, the beginning of the origin sense of things. That's waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Another triputi. So good that I accidentally found that quote there. That's one of the things I got tired of hearing and seeing people do. Even nowadays, I see it all the time. Oh, God, help me, you see. Or they do this. I mean, they must know better, but they still fall into the old habit. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt when I say that. Everyone in the scientific world should know that there's nothing up there. You don't even get all 5 elements up there that we know of. You're missing water and air, basically. So, is that where you're pinioning the poor personal God up on a cloud with a beard and, you know? So, you know, get a clue, wisen up, and look about. Everything is being projected by your own mind. Even out here on the individual level, you projected a house, you built it, you stuffed it with foodstuffs and furniture. That's just all you, and your aspect as the individual God. We just said you were never an animal, and you're really the soul, the Atman. So in between that, what are you? What's the question you ask when you're ready to entertain that? Who am I? It's first stated by Vashishta back at the beginning of a cosmic cycle, and it is said by Ramana Maharshi here in this last century. Who am I? It's Atma Vichara. So you ask yourself. I have a few things that I'm bothered about by that statement too, but I won't go into it now. I think you can't just ask who am I, you have to say, what am I not? See? You can say, who am I, and just walk away from the game, but you're still doing the same old things, thinking the same old thoughts, and suffering the same old karmas, and coming back with your ancestors. So you haven't actually realized that you're the Atman yet, have you? You're just mouthing it. So you want to get to everything? Then dissolve it from this on up, or in. Dissolve it from here on in. And do it every day until it becomes second nature to you. Until you're walking around without having to dissolve it. Because you dissolved it so often, it finally deserted you. I'm not going back to that person. They don't believe in me, said Maya. It just disappeared on you. And you're one of those great souls. It's just always peace, peace, peace. I am Atma Brahman. Who am I turns into I am that. You know my old quip on it. See, people on this realm are saying, what's their mantra? Why me? Why me, Lord? Oh, why me, Lord? And people who are beginning to see their way clear of it are saying, who am I? And people who have arrived are saying, I am. I am. So, a preamble on this chart as we get into the Mahat. Let's then go ahead and take it from the bottom up. There's the loka we talked about, Burloka, this earth, or antariksham, prithivi hi, as they say in the great chants we learned, antariksham. So humans, animals, insects, and plants inhabit that, of course along with microorganisms and things. And the quote there from John I like in the Bible is, that which is born of flesh is flesh, that which is born of spirit is spirit. Then marvel not when I say unto thee, thou must be born again. What a double entendre that is. See? If he's talking to an aspirant and a lover of Brahman, thou shalt be born again, or thou must be born again means in the spirit. If he's talking to a non-believer, you have to be born again many times in order to realize this. You can really take it either way in Vedanta. Get over the ocean of samsara and out of the cycle of death and rebirth and realize your true nature. So there is again a great pleasure kind of palace, and that's earth. People are seeking all the great things of earth with their architecture and with its many foods. I mean, that's one thing I can say about the earth. Best food in all the 7 realms is here. And it's good for 2 reasons. You can make it pure and imbibe it, and it gives you the energy to realize God from the body. So that's what you have to do, purify your food and take it up in the Kundalini Yoga system so that you have pure energy. So Holy Mother used that as one of her most important teachings. From pure food you get pure blood. From pure blood you get pure mind, and from that comes pure energy, and from that you get pure mind and pure thoughts. So you're just doing that with food. So all is food here. Everything's food for something else when it dies. So that's just like a kind of related path with meditating on death that we started talking about is meditating on food. That's life. Because without food, then death becomes very apparent. There are great things to meditate on. There's a kind of a shade difference here, and you get to this inner pleasure garden called Bhuvar or Pitriloka. Somebody was talking about the Pitriloka on satsang yesterday, Saturday. So that Pitris are your ancestors. So this is this, individual collective blend that you're starting to get to. Collective mind really points more to your ancestors, the celestials, the devas and devis, the asuras and the devas and devis. That's a good view of the overall heaven, higher and lower heavens. Bhuva and Swaha. Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha, Tat Savitur Vardhanya. It's right in the most famous of all mantras in India, called the Gayatri, which is also recited by more people in the world than any other mantra in existence. That's said sometimes thousands of times a day by billions of people, the Gayatri mantra. Gayatri is Mother, it's Divine Mother. It's like a way of praying to her without transgressing that law we just looked at, that you can't pray to God. So there, when darkness turns to semi-light, you see, as far as consciousness goes, you have, Sri Krishna, the paths of the dark and of the light, of smoke and the sun. I created these 2 paths in the beginning. This is the Ishvara form. By them, incarnate beings move, coming forth to enjoy or becoming fulfilled, going inwards to never return to the realms of external embodiment again. So path of the sun, path of the moon. By the illumined go by the path of the sun, never to return. Those who are not quite yet illumined or who are bound are going by the path of the moon and returning. So this is the path of returning, like the sun does, like the moon does every night. Sun never goes away. Moon is, as it were, metaphorically speaking, is changing its shape, as it were, every night. The sun is there, shining all the time. So this path of the sun and the path of the moon are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, and they go well with this level of heaven-seeking senses, Sri Krishna calls it in the Gita. Lord Buddha gets into the fray here with a beautiful quote. Beings of this world are blind. Few are those who can see things the way they are. As birds escape from nets, rare are those who go to heaven. The miserly do not go to the world of the gods, and the foolish do not seek liberation. Only the wise become happy in the next world. Those who control the mind, which wanders the worlds, but which resides in the cavern of the heart, will free themselves from all kinds of bondages. A pact few sentences there that, again, could be taken apart and used for further explanation. But there you have that central idea about controlling the mind because it wants to wonder the worlds. Shankara has nice ways of explaining that too. The Antakarna wants to move. So the mind develops with the idea of going to places. Just like a person all of a sudden wants to get wanderlust, you see, and wants to go to visit Europe or something. You say, oh, I've never seen those great places. You say you've seen 7 wonders? I want to go see all 8 of them. Is that how many there are? 8 wonders in the world, something like that. So now we want to look at Sri Ramakrishna's quote, "The mind is the gateway to heaven. It can also be the doorway to hell." There you have a good explanation of what's going on with the ancestors and humans and how to get even beyond heaven. We'll look at that then after the break, because I think we're probably be running out of time for the first half. But you've made it to heaven, in this discourse. So now let's see, as we get back toward the non-dual, how everything changes in a very good way. It becomes more and more subtle as you reach the causal realm and leave the subtle realm behind. So here, let's take our break. Mahalo for your kind attentions.